Well, Brother Anthony has talked me into this, and I was 12 years old when England declared war on Germany. And at first, everything was calm. I thought, well, isn't it too bad being in war? But then things began to happen. And when the German army got to the shores of the English Channel, in France they had the French and German armies trapped between them and the English Channel. So every little boat that was able to cross the English Channel to the coast of France to pick up the soldiers that were trapped, they made their way across. It was a terrible experience. And these soldiers, this defeated armies that were brought over to England, I've never seen an army that was defeated. Those soldiers were filthy, they were unshaven, and they were hungry, and we didn't have food to give them. The barber shops opened their stores to cut the hair and shave the beards of all the men that wanted it. First, we had to give up our schools. All the schools were taken over by the government, and the soldiers were placed in the schools where they showered and deliced and cleaned, and then they just walked the streets. And we as children would go around and talk to them, but they spoke a different language, but they loved to have the children come to them. It was a sad, sad time. That's when I began to realize what war was all about. That was before we were ever bombed. And then came the bombs. My town where I lived was right on the English Channel. It was a resort area. There were no factories there. It was just hotels and restaurants and beautiful public gardens that went down to the sea. It was a place where people came to vacation. But the government confiscated all the hotels and placed troops in them. And we had Canadians and Spanish, Australians, other countries that sent their troops over. We housed them. And that's why we were bombed in that area, because Hitler knew that we housed so many troops. On one particular afternoon, it was on a Sunday, and it was 1 o'clock. We had just finished lunch, and in England they always had linen tablecloths. We did a little differently than over here. And I went outside to shake the tablecloth to get crumbs off of it so it could be used for tea time. And I heard a plane. And I looked up because it was low, and I saw it was German. And I run into the house and told Daddy, that was a German plane, and by then we heard the bombs. And a hotel close by took a direct hit, and it was full of Canadian airmen. They were all killed. It was a very sad Sunday afternoon. I was there for D-Day. Eisenhower was staying right there in Bournemouth. He was in charge of the troops that would go over to France. And I was in the American section. They divided them up into different sections, American and Canadian and British. And so Eisenhower was in control of all three. They prepared to go over to land in France. And first the weather was not cooperative. But in 2 or 3 days the weather cleared enough for them to go. And that day, those young men, 18 and 19 and 20-year-old boys, the army vehicles, the trucks, were parked bumper to bumper everywhere. And they were loaded with these young boys. And I was standing next to a lady, and she had an apple, and she run over to a truck to give the apple to an American soldier. Of course, they were well fed, and we didn't have any food. That's all she had to give, and she gave him the apple, and he took it. And when she came back to me, she said, maybe some German lady will give my son something to eat today. He was a prisoner of war of the Germans. The next morning, they were all gone. And the following day, the wounded were brought back, and the dead. I've seen planes shot down over the English Channel, and the Spitfires fighting. But like Brother Ansley mentioned the Battle of Britain, those Spitfires won the battle. And we had such a little. We had so little arms and planes. And then with the bombing of Pearl Harbor and America coming into the war, we began to have the planes. America sent us planes and tanks and guns and young men. And that's how I met my husband. I didn't meet him till after the war. I was 16 or 17. And my daddy said, no, there's plenty of English boys here. You don't need to be going that far. You don't know how they'll treat you over there. And sure enough, some of the brides that had gone were already back in England with sad stories to tell. I was 19, and my daddy still would not give permission. My mother had died during the war. I went to grandmother. And it was through grandmother's influence I was able to marry Preston. And I came over here. I was over here 6 long weeks before before my husband got here. But his mother was good to me. She was a fine Christian woman. Sometime I'll tell you about the difference it was for me to come out of the Church of England and to become a Baptist. But I was influenced by my mother-in-law. She's a sweet Baptist lady, and I loved her. And sorry to say, my husband died when he was just 42 years old from cancer. And I had 2 little boys that are now grown men. And I'm 92 this next month, and they take care of me. So I'm fine. Thank you.